interested to find out from you this evening. And my son's been doing the Bar Mitzvah program, which Dana's been running, and this is obviously an important part of it.
Okay, great. And we've got, is it Kelly?
Yeah. Hi, I've got 4 kids. I've got 16, 15, 11 and 10.
Great. 16, 15, 11, 10. Lovely. Rochelle?
Hi, I'm Rochelle. I've got just the one son who is 11, will be 12 next month.
Okay, great. And Natalie?
Hi, I have 4 kids, 16, 13, 11, and 6.
16, 13, 11, 6. Okay, lovely. Osnat?
Hi, no, the name is Michael. It's my wife's profile.
All right.
We have 2 kids, boy 14 and our daughter, she's 11.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Harriet?
Hi, my name's Harriet. We have 3 children, Michael, who is 11, Natalie, who's 9, and Dalia, who's 6. And I'm going to keep my video off, if that's okay, because they're at various states of, the little ones at various states of getting to bed.
No problem at all.
But apologies, so video's off,
okay.
but I hear on behalf of Michael, who's 11.
Okay, lovely. Simon?
Hello, good evening. We've got 3 boys, Zach, who is 11, Ori, who is 10, and Elijah, who is 5.
Right, okay. Great, lovely. And who else? We've got Alexandra.
Hello, hi. I'm going to keep my video switched off because my youngest child isn't very well, so I'm just sitting with him actually. We've got 3 children. We've got an 11-year-old daughter, an 8-year-old daughter, and a 4-year-old son. So I'm listening on behalf of my 11-year-old as she approaches adolescence.
Okay, great. And last person is iPhone. I don't know who that is. Somebody on an iPhone? Hello, iPhone?
We've got someone trying to get in and not able to, so I'm assuming it might be iPhone, but it's meant to be Tracy. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm looking out for anybody coming in. Okay. So we're going to start. Well, first, I want to thank Dana. This is our 3rd or 4th project. I've lost track. That we've done together. In fact, I think Donna could probably take this course, give this course, but we've got quite a good run of doing some good projects together. So thank you for your initiative and your encouragement always. We're going to jump straight in. I'm going to share screen and hope the technology works. Technology, as you have noticed, is not my greatest thing, but I think this is going to work. Yes, look at that. Hopefully you can see that. Can you all see the shared screen? Yes, can you see the shared screen? Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry, yes, we can see it.
Right, okay. So what this really is, this is an extract from a 3-part series. The series that we've run, actually now it's a slightly longer series, and even 3 parts was quite compact, but in the fact that you're all in the same sort of space running up to Bar Bat Mitzvah, I'm really going to give tonight an extract from the principles of parenting teenagers. Now, I'm going to say from the outset that each of these principles really requires and could easily have a session in its own right. But I'm going to address the principles. I don't like to call it speciality, but my area, if you like, is, as the book that I co-authored says, everyday parenting for everyday parents. I'm not a therapist. I am a rabbi and a parenting mentor. And I have, thank God, 4 children, 3 teenagers, and one of them has just become 20 years old. So just graduated from the teenage years. I did tell her during her last week, this was it. Last week of being a teenager, any final teenage tantrums after that, no longer allowed. But so we have plenty of hands-on experience, and I'm going to share with you these principles. Today's child, tomorrow's teenager. Subtitle, whatever. She'll never say that. And I don't know if you saw the little video I sent out, but in a way that video was a kind of tantalizing teaser about the head teacher who approached his children and asked them, what would you do if you got stuck with a problem on social media? Maybe you got engaged in a relationship that didn't feel quite right, a connection that didn't feel quite right, or were viewing material that didn't feel quite right. Where would you go? So this was not a particularly big survey, but it was a real survey. It took place in a secondary school in the States, and the vast majority of teenagers, their first response was they wouldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't know where to go. Where did parents come in terms of this particular survey? They came fourth or even fifth down, after friends, after siblings, after cousins, maybe after teachers. And parents were all quite shocked that in fact they came so far down the line, because we all hope that our children come to us first. Then he engaged with the parents and said, so what is it? What are the factors that are the barriers between yourselves and your children, ourselves and our children? So if we were in a room together, which was the original plan, then I would throw this out to you. What are the barriers? But because we started a little bit late, I'm going to run through, although many of them are pretty obvious. Children feel judged. They're going to feel that we feel that they have let us down. They're going to be worried about sanctions. They're going to be worried that we won't listen to them properly, won't understand. All of these. We want to create an environment at home where none of these barriers exist. Now, we all hid things from our parents. Speak for myself, I'm not going to do a survey, but I'm sure we all hid things from our parents. But nonetheless, ultimately, we want to create environments where, as far as possible, our children feel that we are the first point of call. The principles I'm sharing tonight are going to be the principles to create such an environment. As I've said, each of which could require elaboration. I'm going to speak for about 40 minutes and then open it out to the floor. I'm not in a rush afterwards, so we can take questions. Let's start off with the first, and that is, look at this quote from John Gottman, because teenagers occupy a brand new world. Don't be surprised if your teenager becomes totally self-absorbed at some point during adolescence. His interest in family matters will wane as his relationship with friends takes center stage. Raising the emotionally intelligent child, John Gottman. Now, a child is caught between a wannabe adult and a struggling child. And a great quote from Chaim Ginot, Israeli psychologist. As parents, our need is to be needed. As teenagers, they need not to need us. This conflict is real. As we help those whom we love become independent of us, this can become our finest hour. To let go and want to hold on it requires almost generosity. Only parents are capable of such painful greatness. So children live in a whole new world, and the world of adolescence. And probably the most significant change, apart from the hormonal changes, the physical changes, the pressures that change at school, is the fact that their sphere of influence changes from parental and family to peers. We cannot overestimate the extent of peer pressure in that adolescent world. It is absolutely paramount. I recently gave a talk to an organization called J-Teens, and the subject matter was helping children negotiate and navigate the difficult worlds of friendships. We literally spent a whole session just on the topic of friendships. Friendships become paramount, and it can be quite painful for parents because that adjustment can be quite sudden and quite sharp. There's a great book called Untangled, which is by a psychologist called Lisa Damour. It's really about raising adolescent girls, although a lot of it is relevant to both girls and boys. And she gives a wonderful analogy of when our children learn to swim. And you get into the pool with them, and once they've learned to swim, they push out into the middle. And then they come back to the side of the pool every so often to be able to stabilize themselves or take a breather. But then when they want to go back into the middle of the pool, they kick against the side and they go back into the middle. We as parents are that side of the pool. Our children want to float into the middle, they want to swim in the middle, they want to be independent of us. But every so often they need to come back and hold on to us. And those moments are so lovely when they become affectionate again, when they become tactile again, when they become needy again, and that makes us feel great. But what happens, before we know it, they've kicked against us to float back into the center of the pool. That is the relationship we have with our children as adolescents. They don't want to need us, but they can't manage without us. That conflict is real. So the first thing we need to know is children occupy a total new world when it comes to adolescence, even more so in the world of social media, where their friends are with them 24 hours. And it's not so much as though they're addicted to social media as they're addicted to their friendship. It is the oxygen, which is why COVID has been so difficult for so many children, because they were deprived of that essential oxygen. That is the first principle that I want to share with you. What is the goal of parenting? Again, it's a really important discussion. What is the goal? So I'm going to ask you actually to give me some response, either by coming off mute or sending me a chat. I would like to present, based on Torah sources, that this is the goal of parenting: to help my child discover and maximize their potential so that they can fulfill their role in Hashem's world. To help my child discover and maximize their potential so that they can fulfill their role in Hashem's world. What would you say is the most important word in the above sentence? Audience participation. What is the most important word in the above sentence? To help my child discover and maximize their potential so they can fulfill their role in Hashem's world. Any suggestions, please?
Maximize their potential.
Choose one word.
Maximize.
Maximize. Okay, Tony says maximize. Okay, any other suggestions here?
Discover.
Discover. Okay.
Potential.
Potential. And we've got slightly more words than people here. So what was that?
Help.
Help. So you may not agree with me, and this is not written in stone. I'm going to suggest the most important word is actually their. It's about their potential. And this is so important because we cannot change our teenager. Much as we would love to, much as we try to, we cannot change our teenager. We can only coach them on how to change over time. The only person we can control is ourselves and our reaction to them. But it's about helping them discover their potential. And so often in parenting, we mix up our agenda and their agenda. And we have to ask ourselves, for whom am I doing this? I'll give you an example. Let's imagine your child goes to a simcha wearing an outfit or with a hairstyle that you think is appalling. Is appalling. Let's say it doesn't cross any ethical boundaries, but you think it's appalling and looks ridiculous. And you are embarrassed that we're going to walk out with a hairstyle like that, or with shoes like that. You're embarrassed. Or maybe you think they should dress more formally for a simcha and they want to dress in a kind of really casual, informal way. And there's a whole head-to-head row that ensues. Now you have to ask yourselves, who am I doing this for? Am I doing it for me? Am I doing it for them? Other examples. Maybe you've got certain academic ambitions for your child, but they're just not wired that way. They may have many other skills and many other strengths, but they're not wired that way. They just can't sit down. Maybe there's a certain level of ADHD. It doesn't matter what it is. And you ask yourself, well, who am I doing this for? Maybe when they were younger, they learned a musical instrument, and I'm determined they should learn a new musical instrument, even though they hate every minute of their hobby. Who am I doing this for? When it comes to the teenage years, these are really important questions, because often if I get this question wrong, I'm going to parent in a way that can be highly counterproductive. So let's move on to the underlying principle of everything, and that is the relationship is everything. Quote another book, when a child feels close to his parents, he feels good about himself. When he does not, his self-esteem is shot. By an excellent short book, The Heart of Parenting. It's the only book I recommend of those quoted. The one that actually was not in here, which is Lisa Damour's book, Untangled, is a particularly excellent book as well. This is also an excellent book. When a child feels close to his parents, he feels good about himself. When he does not, his self-esteem is shot. And to quote Dr. Pelkovic, child psychologist in the States, very well known in the field, rules without relationship equals rebellion. If I have rules, even if they appear to be successful, but I don't have the relationship, then unfortunately there will be rebellion. Because in essence, it becomes a bit totalitarian, and nobody wants to live in a totalitarian regime. In our 3-part series, we spend almost a whole of the first session talking about the relationship, how to build the relationship, how to maintain the relationship. Let's spend a few minutes on this, because every child wants a relationship with their parents. And I'm going to say that again. Every child wants a relationship with their parents, without any question. They may tell you or tell us that they hate us. They may tell us that we are the worst parents in the world. They may tell us that, no, they wish they'd been born in a different family, but every child wants a relationship with the parents. That's assuming, God forbid, there isn't abuse. And even where there is, a child yearns for a proper relationship with their parents. So that is, in a way, good news. It's very good news, because it's never too late to try and create a better relationship. Never too late. Now, as I said, we could spend some time developing the concept, and maybe what I'll do is I'll come back to that if time allows, because I want to review the principles. But this is the number one principle. And so often we will win the battle and lose the war. We'll get our way, we'll have our say, we will get compliance, but we can risk damaging the relationship in the process. And another analogy for relationship is a bit like it's the rope. As my child drifts away from the parental home, and as my child drifts into the wider world, how strong is that rope that's going to keep them connected? If I do things that damage that relationship, I'm fraying that rope. And ultimately, many, many, many teenagers will stretch the rope as far as they can go, as far as they can go. But as long as that rope remains intact, then if they've been given a wholesome upbringing to begin with, then there is every possibility and every probability that they will come back to the relationship and that they will live up to the relationship. But I honestly cannot say it enough times that relationship is everything. When I talk to parents, as I do on a weekly basis, my first thing is I try and explore what is the quality of a relationship at the moment. Two questions to ask ourselves, and that is, what do I think my child will say about my opinion of them? Let's imagine you overheard a conversation, telephone conversation, and between your child and another friend. And the friend says to your child, what do you think your parents think of you? What would your child say? Would they say, well, actually, they believe in me. Actually, they give me unconditional love. Actually, even if I mess up and give them aggro, I know they love me. Or will they say, I can never do anything right. I don't think anything is good enough for them. I feel constantly criticized. I don't even know if they believe in me. What are they going to say? Those are the two extremes. What are they going to say? It's a very, very important question to ask ourselves, because children need unconditional love. That does not mean that we agree with everything they do or approve of everything they do. Of course we don't. But it does mean that we believe in them and we give them unconditional love. And that's really, really, really vital. And as you run up to bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, it's an opportunity to reinforce that. And the funny thing is, a simcha can be a time of great tension. Of course, on the day, everybody puts on the right smiles and the photographer takes the right moments, but it can be a time of great, great tension. Having made a few ourselves, it can be a time of great, great tension. And again, one has to ask ourselves, who am I doing this for? It's vital. It becomes an opportunity to reinforce the relationship and not one that, God forbid, should fragment the relationship. So that's, in a nutshell, the most important thing I'm going to share. And I can't stress enough. And remember, as children become older, so they become less tactile. And if there are younger children in the house, we as parents can often forget that even teenagers need a tactile connection if they will welcome it. And it's easy because we get our tactile satisfaction, if you like, from the younger children who are putting our arms around us, but the older children still need that. And again, the principle of that is, as much as they will welcome is good. And if they shrink, if they cringe, then you have to back off. So for some, it'll just be a high five. For some, it'll be a peck on the cheek. For some, it'll be a good old-fashioned hug. Whatever it is, but it's so important to remember to engage with our children in any way that we can that shows them our love. As I've said, we could spend more time on that, but I'm sharing the principles. This is the fundamental principle. So what this really means is that as we parent our adolescents, we can't use the same methodology as we did when they were younger. Adolescence is a time of rapid change and instability. It's also a time of self-discovery. Our job as parents is to facilitate that transition. We will often achieve more by saying less, communicate better by listening than by speaking, mentor more successfully by giving choices than by giving instructions. That's based on Chaim Ginot. But the key word is to facilitate. Facilitate means that in a way I step back and help them discover themselves. If you've ever had the privilege of, maybe some of you are coaches, I don't know, but of being coached by a good coach, A good coach facilitates, helps us to discover what we ourselves are capable of. A good coach is a great listener. No one can hear until they've been heard. From the book that I co-authored, no one can hear until they've been heard. An adolescent needs plenty of real listening, non-judgmental, real listening. So they come home and they fling their bag across the room and they've had a test and they've done really badly in the test and they blame the whole world. It was the teacher, it was the exam, it is the school, it is the syllabus, it is everything apart from them. I'm going to come off share for a minute. It's everything apart from them, right? It's not their fault. And we know the reason why they did badly in their test is because they were up till 3 o'clock in the morning, the night before, on their device. And it's so tempting for us to say, look, I told you 100 times, etc., etc. But what will happen then? The child will throw something across the room, storm upstairs, slam the door behind them and say, you never understand, you have told you 100 times, you know, blah, 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 blah. Now, no one can hear until they have been heard. First, they need to be heard, properly heard, empathetically heard. I'm sorry the test was so bad. It must be so difficult for you. Were you expecting to do better? I can't see somebody trying to get in, to be honest. Doesn't show anybody trying to get in here. Barney just messaged me, but I can't, it doesn't show anybody trying to get in.
Okay, don't worry.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
So nobody can hear until they've been heard. And that is a skill, to listen properly and to then to know when, how, and if to offer advice. You might not be at that moment, it might be at a later stage. Again, this is a principle that we explore more thoroughly in a 3-part series. But the principle is, what I'm trying to do is facilitate their own self-discovery. Facilitate their own self-discovery, help them explore the options in front of them. Because a golden rule in teenage parenting is, the more I insist, the more they resist. Because they're looking for independence. They're trying to break free. They don't really want our advice, but they do want our advice, but they don't want our advice. You ever been in that situation? You know, what should I wear? What should I do? Should I go? Should I not go? I think you should go. I don't want to go. Well, no, you don't have to go. No one's telling you have to go. But all my friends are going. And going round and round in circles. Can we have some nods here? Does anybody relate to that? Yes, Tanya, thank you. Anyone relate to that? Nobody else? Yes, thank you. Kelly. Oh, Simon's nodding very enthusiastically there. Thank you for coming off camera. Oh, somebody is trying to get in. Grace. Grace, have you joined us? No. Grace, are you there somewhere? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so, oh, Grace is there. So, and so they want us and they don't want us. So we have to, thank you, Grace. Sorry, Grace, for all these technical mishaps tonight. Apologies, we've had a lot of technical difficulties tonight. It has been recorded, so we can send you the recording afterwards. So sorry. So, we have to facilitate their ability to explore the options and then help them. And that's really the word that we use through the whole of those adolescent years, for the 7 or 8 years of adolescence, from the age of 12 to the age of 20, because ultimately, if we're trying to use the same tools that we used before they were adolescents, those tools are not going to work. They're going to be counterproductive. So it's really a whole skill. And as I say, if we were in the same room together, we'd maybe even do a little bit of role play to this process of facilitating. Because it is, oh, Lisa's just joined us as well. Lisa, welcome. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties, if that's been the reason why we had a delayed entry. I'm really sorry we had a lot of technical difficulties tonight, but it has been recorded and we'll be happy to send you the recording afterwards. Lisa, if you are there.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry for the difficulties.
No
okay.
problem.
Okay, let's come back. Let's come back to our presentation. So, facilitation is we're going to look at different aspects of it. Again, very briefly, in principle, the difference between criticism and communication. Criticism is always poison. It's always poison. Distinction is criticism is purpose focused, whereas communication is issue focused. This was your responsibility and you did not do it again and again and again. Now, especially if it comes with a label. Now, it doesn't mean you can't say, look, I feel that you said you would take care of this and you haven't done so, and now we've got a real problem. Doesn't mean you can't ever say you, but in essence, what you're focusing on the issue rather than an attack on the person. So criticism is person focused, whereas communication is issue focused. And by the way, this does not mean we can't express ourselves with passion. One could say, look, I feel really hurt by what you've said. I feel really hurt. And I would like you to find a different way of expressing yourself, because those words are hurtful. Now, again, you keep coming back to the issue. Those words are hurtful. And I'm also a human being. And I don't talk that way to you. And I'm asking you to find different ways of talking to me. I appreciate that you're upset. I appreciate that you're angry, but there are better choices of words and you can make a better choice. So again, as I said, it doesn't mean you can't use you word, but in essence, you're focusing on the issue rather than attacking the person, rather than saying, you are so hurtful and you are so nasty and you are so spiteful. And how can, that is an attack on the person. Very important distinction. Now, it's very hard when we're feeling under attack or when we are feeling hurt not to counter attack. But we role model good parenting and we role model good relationships when we recognize that distinction. And that's all part of the process of facilitation. Now, again, of course, teenagers still need boundaries. Teenagers still need boundaries and they still welcome boundaries. And we mustn't be scared of creating the right boundaries. And very often, it's funny, I've seen this and come across this, teenagers respect parents who create boundaries, but it's got to be the right boundaries. They've got to be achievable. They've got to be clear. They've got to be doable. They've got to be consistent. Again, to quote Rabbi Kestenbaum, you have to know before you say no. But there are times when saying no is absolute and it's right and it's necessary and it is vital and it is expected by the teenager. And the teenager respects that. So how do we know when to create a boundary and when not to create a boundary? We want to say yes, of course, as often as we can. We want to avoid as many battles as we can. We want to turn a blind eye as often as we can. But there are times when we cannot, and it becomes completely right and necessary to set a boundary. So I like this idea, which is the relationship bank. Think of your relationship as a bank account and ask oneself the following questions. Now, these questions are going to be summarized in one. I'm not expecting everybody to take out a piece of paper and before we say no to run through the following and the checklist. But in essence, in short, does the benefit outweigh the costs? Why am I doing this? Let's take an example. Let's imagine you feel your teenager is going to bed miles too late or spends too much time on their devices and you feel it's time to introduce some boundaries. Devices are a whole separate issue. And boundaries should be introduced before a device is handed over. But let's take that as an example. Why am I doing this? What's my motivation? The motivation is because they're going to bed at ridiculous hours, not getting enough sleep. Is this the right time to do it? But if they've just failed a test because they were up till 3 o'clock in the morning and they're feeling miserable about themselves, even though I'm seething because it was completely their fault, but it isn't the right time. I've got to listen to them, hear them out, move them into a better space, and maybe today or tomorrow probably it will be a better time. Are they in the right place? If they've just had a whole big bust up with one of their best friends, then they're not in the right place. What will I achieve? What am I hoping to achieve? So if, in other words, let's say I'm going to insist that the lights have got to be off by, I don't know, 11 o'clock. What will I achieve? Well, if I achieve that, then I'll achieve that I'll have a better night's sleep, etc., etc. Can I carry this through? That's so, so vital. And this is where the relationship is everything. And this is a difficult question because what's going to happen if they don't do it? Can I carry this through? Is there going to be a sanction? Is there going to be some kind of consequence? Can I carry this through? If I can't carry this through, I have to ask myself, then what am I going to achieve? And sometimes it comes a point in the relationship with teenagers where actually, despite my best intentions, I'm not going to be able to achieve. And all that will happen is I'm going to fray that relationship rope. In short, does the benefit outweigh the costs? Now, many times it does. The benefit does outweigh the costs, but I've got to think about it like a credit account, and I've got to make sure that I am in credit. And also I've got to make sure that if I make a withdrawal from the account, I can replace it with some credit as soon as I possibly can. So if I've taken something away, doesn't mean I've got to punish the child for the rest of the evening. So let's say a child storms off into their room in a great big huff because I have decided that they cannot go out this evening. They cannot go out this evening because either it's a sanction or it is because I feel they've got work to do and they can't go out. Doesn't mean I can't bring them up a drink. Doesn't mean I can't offer them supper. I want to put something back into the account. Now remember, sanctions are a last resort, not a first response. They're a last resort, not a first response. But boundaries are necessary, and every teenager requires boundaries. Of course, as they get older, 17, 18, it's much, much harder. But even then, if you're living in your house, which I presume they are at the moment, then boundaries are important and some respect for the household is important. So coming back to the previous slide, I need to ask myself, are they achievable? Are they clear? Are they doable? Are they consistent? Another way of putting it, why am I doing this? Is this the right time? Are they in the right place? What will I achieve? Can I carry this through? If the answer to all of this is I'm doing this for the right reason, not because of my own, I'm embarrassed, this is the right time, I feel we're in a good space, we can have a proper conversation about it. I do feel that they're in the right place. What will I achieve? Yes, they may be upset and they may even be angry with me, but it's important. And yes, I can carry this through. And in a two-parent household, it's vital that both parents can carry this through. Two-adult household, it's vital that both can carry this through. Okay, I'm going to close almost before we summarize with a very important factor. Now we've covered an enormous amount tonight, and really what I've done is, as I said, I've given to those who've just joined, I'm given principles of a much longer course. But in this one session, which was about preparing for pre and bar mitzvah and adolescence, I wanted to share some principles. This is called choice theory. It's a fancy name for a process which we all really do in our everyday lives. When we impose, we create resentment. When we empower, we create responsibility. A teenager will generally only take responsibility when they feel they have bought in. Because remember, they're striving for independence. So what I want to do is create a situation where it becomes their choice. I'll give you an example. When I have had occasion over the years to teach teenagers a bit about Jewish concepts, Jewish philosophy, and I get asked, what makes you so confident that God exists? The last thing I would do is give a teenager an answer. I would give a teenager the arguments, both ways. And I would say, well, what do you think? When a teenager buys in, they take responsibility. When a teenager feels it's imposed, the more we insist, the more they resist. So it's quite a skill to, so let's take an example of the teenager who failed the test. And they've got another test coming up in a few days' time, and it's coming up to winter holidays. And they're not that keen on working, but you are keen on them working. And if you sit down with them and say, right, it's got to be 6 hours of their winter holiday, it's just not going to work. It's going to end up in a row, and every day is going to end up in tears, and you're not going to get anywhere at all. So it's true that perhaps a generation or two ago, there might have been no choice, but we don't live in that generation. I'm happy to discuss why things have changed, but our children are much, much more independent in many respects than they used to be. In many respects, yes, in some respects, no. But so I would say I would give choices within boundaries. So I would say, it is holiday time, and I appreciate you want to take some time out, and that's fine. That's what holidays are for. However, you've got exams coming up in January, and therefore there has to be some work done every day. Now, I know how much work I'd like you to do. I'd like you to have a discussion with you. Well, I don't want to do any work. Well, that isn't the choice, I'm afraid. Some work's got to be done. Okay, I'll do half an hour every day. Half an hour is not going to be enough to get you through. I'd like you to do 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 2 in the morning, whatever it is. Oh, no, I'd say 4 or 5 hours a day. 4 or 5 hours a day, that's ridiculous. Well, this is a negotiating situation. Well, how many do you think you can do? Maybe an hour. I'm sorry, that's not enough. an hour, between 5 hours and an hour, I'm sorry, the gap's too large. So I'm negotiating with them in many respects. They say, well, all right, maybe I'll do 4 hours. Okay, 4 hours. So I would say to them, I don't mind when you do those 4 hours, but they've got to be done before 5 o'clock. Because I know if it's left till the evening, it's not going to get done. So I'm giving choices within boundaries. So I don't mind when you do them. Well, I'll do half an hour in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. I don't mind how you do that. That's fine. That's up to you. Don't mind how you do them, but they've got to be done before 5 o'clock. So what I've done is I've created some space to allow some choices, right? Allow some choices. Let me take a more complex example. Let's say a child has got a real issue with a friend at school who's not been treating them well. And actually, you don't think that friendship is such a good one anyway. But it is a friendship with a popular child. Popular doesn't always mean nice. Popular sometimes means powerful, but a popular child. And your son or daughter's come home really hurt by this, something the friend did. Now, and you want to discuss with them what the options are. But you know, if you were to say to them, look, I haven't liked this friend for a while, I think you ought to go back to so-and-so. They're going to say, what do you mean? It's my best friend. It's not going to work. So it's a question of listening to them. I can see that you feel hurt. What do they say? Oof, that was really not a nice thing. What do you feel about it? What do you think the options are? Have you thought about how to go forward? You're exploring it with them. You're exploring it with them. And really, that's what it is. Remember, you're helping them to discover themselves, exploring it with them. Well, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should. Right? Now, the fascinating thing about this process, I don't like calling it a technique. Technique makes them sound like machines that can be fixed. This isn't a technique. This is and I can show you with more time the Torah source for this, because there's a Torah source in Pirkei Avot for this concept, what today is called emotional intelligence. It's about listening to a person. And very often when we listen to somebody, they actually find the solution within themselves. And we are simply facilitating their ability to discover that solution. And then explore the options with them. They might say, well, maybe they haven't been that well. And you might ask probing questions. For example, is this the first time that has happened? No, it did something similar last week. And you might say, wasn't there something round about your birthday as well? Yes, there is. Then you might say, do you feel this friendship is good for you? You've got to ask in a very, very, very neutral way. Don't lead the witness. Do you feel this friendship is good for you? Are there any other options out there? Now, it's a process. It's a process of helping them. If they come to a point where they will say, you know what, maybe I should spend more time with so-and-so. You don't then go, that's exactly what I was thinking. What a great idea. You say, well, that might be an option. I think it might be an option. I respect that choice. Then they feel it's theirs. So, and again, it requires more elaboration, but the principle is the same. The principle is that when we facilitate, we help them find the choices themselves. Let me just summarize and then open it out to the floor. I'm conscious that we've covered an enormous amount in a short space of time, but that was the brief. So we want to create an environment in which our adolescents come to us first. First of all, they've got to feel that we understand their world. By the way, they don't want us to be part of their world. They do not want us to be part of their world. They don't want us to pretend we listen to their music or dress like them. They don't want us to be part of their world. On the contrary, they need us to be the counterbalance to the instability of their world. But they need to feel that as much as we can, we understand their world. Whose agenda is it? Is it theirs or is it ours? Who am I doing this for? New tools, facilitating, helping them discover themselves. The relationship is everything. The difference between communication and criticism is person-focused, communication is issue-focused. Boundaries are still vital. Apply judiciously, relationship bank. And we have to give space and allow choices. If we can adapt some or all of these ideas, then we are creating an environment in which our child feels understood, in which our child feels that we are ready to listen, in which our child feels that there's unconditional love, in which our child feels that we do our best to be non-judgmental, and which our child feels that we're in it for them and not in it for us. That type of environment is an environment where there's a much stronger possibility, if our child gets into trouble one form or another, then they'll come to us. Whereas in an environment which doesn't have that, they're much less likely to come to us. So recently, without giving away any confidentiality whatsoever, I had a rather surprising WhatsApp from a teenager. And the teenager said, I don't quite know why parents have been listening to, but I know they've been listening to you. And I want to thank you because, and I quote, I feel more understood. I feel more understood. So, and this is really what it's all about, to create that type of environment. So I'm going to stop talking now because I've spoken for about 40 minutes or so, and open it out to the floor for your comments, questions. We can come off recording if you like. Should we do that? Or if anyone would like me to come off recording, just let me know. Thoughts and questions, please.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I liked your spiel about negotiation. And sometimes it feels a bit sort of wrong to start negotiating because you sort of feel, well, you know, I'm the parent as a child. Why am I negotiating with them? But I obviously understand that it's from what you've said, it certainly is a useful tactic, and it gives them a feeling that they're part of the decision-making process. But what happens if they are not playing that game and they are just and their proposals are just so unreasonable that there's not even really a negotiation. It's not a negotiation we can credibly enter into. How have you got any tips for sort of how we deal with those sorts of situations?
Well, it's going to depend on the age of the child. Sorry, this is still recording at the moment. Are you okay with that?
I don't have an issue with that.
Fine. It's going to depend on the age of the child. So I've forgotten how old your children are.
My oldest is 11. I've got a 10-year-old as well. Those are the two primary candidates.
And you said you got 3 boys, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the age of 11, there's no question about it, then there's less negotiation, and there is still quite a lot of, I'm afraid this is the way it is, right? You can explain your reasons, but this is the way it is. So the age of 11, there's no question about it. It's less negotiation. There can still be some negotiation, and because ultimately a negotiation, you see, in a way, the word negotiation is not quite the right word, because negotiation is more about, well, I'm not in the negotiation field. It's more, but my understanding of it, it's more about me ensuring that my interests are protected and your interests are serviced, but ultimately it's about my interests being protected. Here, this is about facilitation. I want to teach them to take responsibility. And at the age in which they're at, the best way to teach them responsibility is if they buy in. So ultimately, my goal is to help them discover and take responsibility for themselves. Do you see that difference? Right?
Yes.
So ultimately, I'm in a coaching mode. Really, I'm in a coaching mode. So, but when our children are younger, then I'm afraid it is about saying, I'm sorry, but this is the way it is. These are the options I'm giving you. So let's take an example of bedtime. The child wants to go to bed at 1 a.m. in the morning at 11 years old. That's ridiculous. So you might say, look, but all my friends go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, and I would never get drawn into that one. You want your child to go to bed at 9:30, right? Or whatever it is. So they're saying you want 9:30, they want 11. You say, look, they want 1 o'clock in the morning. Look, you can say, look, I'm prepared to think about something closer to 9:30. What would you suggest? Or you might say, look, you can either go to bed, I don't mind, you can go to bed at 10 o'clock, or you can go to bed at 10:15 if, I don't know, if guaranteed lights off at 10:30, whatever it is, you'll give some choice, right? Or for example, your child comes home and doesn't want to do their homework. I don't want to do any homework tonight. I'm sorry, homework's got to be done tonight, but you can either do it before supper, you can do it after supper, before the screens go on. So you're giving some choice, but it's much, much less choice. So you're teaching them the idea that they can make a choice, but they have to take responsibility for those choices. So it's more about facilitating and coaching them to take responsibility. But if the options they present are ridiculous, then you present options which are creditable, but it still give them some option.
Okay, no, that's helpful. But what if just taking that scenario to an extreme, the child says, "Well, I'm not going to negotiate about this. You know, I'm my own person, and you can't make me. You can't force me. You can't speak of the devil. You can't force me to go to bed. So that's what I'm going to do."
Okay. Is your son still listening to this?
He's 5, so he's probably not going to. This one's 5, so he's probably not going to pay much heed anyway, because I've already told him that he has to go to bed. We did the negotiation thing, but it hasn't played out as I'd hoped.
Right. Well, 5 is too young for negotiation. I wouldn't offer any negotiation at that age, to be honest. Not at all. This is going to depend on basically the consequences of not following through on actions, right? So we could, in any healthy household, there should be consequences of not following through on actions. Just as in life, there are consequences. I don't know what you do, but if you don't turn up to work, then after a while, you're going to lose your job. And that's how it goes. Or if you're a boss and others don't turn up to work, they'll lose their job. And if you don't deliver to whatever your clients want, then they're not going to pay you at the end of the thing. And that's how life works. And it's by the way, I've sometimes been criticized for using the word punishment. I don't have a problem using the word punishment. The Torah has rewards and punishments, and life has rewards and punishments. And that's how it goes sometimes. And I don't think there's anything to be scared of for that. Obviously, as I've said, sanctions, punishments are a last resort, not a first response. But they are necessary sometimes. And it's vital that a healthy household, children know there are consequences that will be followed through. So probably, really, to have a proper discussion about this, I'd have to probe a little bit more about how your household runs in terms of whether consequences are genuinely followed through. My experience is that with most parents, if there's a history of following through with consequences, then consequences are effective. Where they're not effective, sometimes the history of following it through isn't that strong. So that's really where I would start. Is there a strong structure of consequences being followed through or not? And if there isn't, then that needs redressing. But if your children are still at the age that they are, it can still be redressed. It might come as a bit of a shock to the system, but it would be for their good and not for their bad. So I don't mind if we, find a time to discuss this in more detail, but that's to my mind the issue here, if you like. Does that resonate?
Yeah, no, it does. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thanks very much.
I must tell you that it's very painful as a parent to do things that are going to upset our children. Very, very painful.
Yes.
I once had a parent who only came to one of my classes. This was about 15 years ago, and she was so shocked that I said about children need sanctions, and sometimes they're going to need to have things taken away from them. And the parent said, "But my child will cry." And I would say, "Look, I don't never want to make my child cry, but sometimes I'm afraid you can't help that." And this lady was so horrified at the idea that her child would cry that she never turned up again to my classes. I don't know what to think about. I don't know what happened to her children. To be honest, I shudder to think, because it's vital. It's vital. We've all got traffic. We've all got, parking tickets here and there. That's the way the world works. And it has to work that way, otherwise there'd be anarchy. So the right sort of no is an education, not a deprivation. And yes, we've all been in the situation where unfortunately we've had to cancel something nice or take something away, and we bit our lip, but we've got to know, ultimately that's what raises a mensch, basically. It's important that they know the consequences are real.
Well, that's a very fitting point for me to hand out some consequences, or at least follow through on my promises on that. So I'm going to turn my video off again. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody else? Any thoughts? Well, some thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you, really. It's really just made me think about how we are with our older daughter, and I feel like we've got into a pattern of a little bit of blaming. Please accept my apology. I'm not putting the camera on because I'm still with my little boy. But we've got ourselves into a bit of a bad pattern, and actually just listening to you's made me realize that actually we need to readdress our relationship and just some simple things that we can do with her, so it doesn't come across that we're blaming her, and actually helping her deal with the emotions that she's going through at the moment as she gets older.
Right.
And also the other thing that you said about physical touch, when I think about it, we're so much more tactile with our younger children because they are more cuddly and want to be held more. And it's easy to forget that actually, just because they're bigger, they do still need to have that, you know, those cuddles. They do still have the need for them.
Well, if you have time to read, and the book by Lisa D'Amour about raising adolescent girls is an outstanding book. I don't agree with everything in it, but there's an enormous amount which is very practical and outstanding. So,
who's that, Lisa D'Amour?
Yeah, it's called Untangled. Very easy to order.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think somebody else was going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that behaviour also depends on pecking order. My youngest is 11, and I think when you have role models, older siblings that are that much older, it's not a different ball game, but definitely it's a different playing field, I feel. But I think the principles still count. But that's something that I feel that I have to take into account.
Yes. Yeah.
My eldest is always telling me that I spoil my youngest, and you know, and I see it from her perspective. I understand where she's coming from.
Yeah, and that is a very common accusation, But and to a certain degree, well, it depends. If it's true, then maybe it needs to be acknowledged. But I wouldn't necessarily lose too much sleep over it.
I think maybe the word was empathize.
Yeah.
I think she feels that I empathize more, and therefore maybe I empathize less with her.
Right.
That's the skill in parenting, I guess.
Yeah. You said your eldest is 21. Is that what you said? Right. Okay, but someone has to somehow or other create a different type of relationship with the eldest in many ways, especially when they're at that age, and and in a way, one can have that type of adult conversation. But perhaps you're right, and perhaps it's natural, and I'm sorry if it's come across that way. You know, I like to say to my children, we try to give each of you what you need in the right time. We don't always get it right. We've done our best, and I'm not saying we've always got it right. No parent always gets it right. So I think it's about acknowledging that without sounding too defensive, and finding ways of creating that uniqueness with your oldest daughter. Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we close? Okay, so apologies again for the technical difficulties at the beginning. Try and resolve them before next week.
My apologies too. I look forward to receiving the recording. I really, looks like I missed a very good and informative session. So thank you.
Okay, and I will say that this is an extract of a longer course. So if anybody is interested in a more thorough series of at least 3 sessions, then you know that we as always, we can always create more. But let's do next week. Next week is about values, actually imparting values to our children. And actually, it is particularly important before a bar and bas mitzvah, because we all make those wonderful speeches at bar and bat mitzvah to our distracted children. We're busy with the party and everything else that goes on. But ultimately, imparting values is not about the bar and bat mitzvah. It's about how we live and who we are. So we're going to look at, it's going to be slightly slower paced because there's a different type of presentation. but it's about exploring what values are and how values are communicated, and what Jewish values are, etc., etc. And I'm going to suggest some values that I think it's important for us to communicate to our children. They're not fixed in stone. You may have your own ideas, but I think we're going to suggest 2 or 3 key values that I think are great to communicate. That's the aim for next week.
Can I just ask you quick questions? Oh.
Yeah, go on, Simon.
Sorry. Yeah, just a very quick one. Do you do small groups face to face? Because that would be potentially of interest.
Yes, I do, and that was the original goal of this, was face to face. That was the original goal, and of course, it's much preferable to do face to face. And I don't know if everybody here would like to meet face to face next week, I'm more than happy to do that. But I think the vast majority of people felt that Zoom was preferable.
What about courses?
So, I mean, I'm doing, yes, we do courses regularly, and we will often do courses tailor-made. So someone will call up and say, I've got, half a dozen friends who'd like to do a course, and we'll run courses that way. These days, because we get fairly regular requests, we often do them in response to requests as opposed to scheduling them in.
Okay, thank you.
Donna, you can pass on my details.
Absolutely. I just wanted to check, will it be the same Zoom link next week, or will you send a new one out?
I don't know yet, because I don't know what went wrong with mine. So
okay, fine. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, but I'll tidy it up next day or so.
If people, as you say, originally this was meant to be in person, but I think it was just easier for people to commit on Zoom. And obviously we didn't want to bring Rabbi Herman out, if people weren't going to show up. But if there is a preference to have it in person next week, as long as everyone commits to that, then that's, we can absolutely do that. So if anyone wants to kind of message me afterwards and just let me know if you prefer Zoom or in person, we can look at actually maybe having it. It would be in Shul in one of the small rooms.
Or you mean somebody's house if somebody wants to host
or in
it?
someone's house, yeah. Someone actually offered to host it in their house tonight, but we didn't know the numbers, so.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Right. Have a good week, everybody.
Everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.